Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's spotlight is authentication feature. We'll start implementing the domain layer, data layer, and integration tests for the repository implementation, then the presentation layer. Let's create under the solution pocket goods, add a new project, make sure to choose WPF user control library. Let's name it authentication feature and create. All right, now we have to configure the project to add the needed dependencies. Right click, manage NuGet packages. All we need here is the SVG image. And that's all. Everything else is going to be served from core and core UI. Right click, add projects reference, choose core and core UI. And that's pretty much it. Now let's delete this particular control and let's add the dedicated folders for presentation, domain, and data. What I found actually as a workaround, I have saved here empty structure file, copy this and paste this under the authentication feature. Just initially add those lines and sync or save the file, and it's gonna appear here. However, once creating, for example, a class, it should disappear from the item group. All right, it's gonna be an interface. Let's call it authentication repository. Basically, the repository should disappear from the list of folders. There you go. You can adopt this kind of approach. All right, the first function is the login function. Instead of using async and await, we're going to use iObservable. We have to serve after logging the user. We need to serve the stream of data representing user data to allow the user to toggle the item back and forth and to reflect this in real time under the wishlist. In other words, it's going to be the single source of truth, which is the database or the stream of data from database, as we have done under Kotlin and Swift. And we have implemented a local observable for this purpose under the database section. The second function is register. We don't care here actually about any observer. It should be an async function. The get authenticated user, and to check if we have a cache authenticated user, and the logout function, as well as to clear the cached user. Now let's provide the use cases. Let's implement, for example, the login use case. Public sealed class, authentication repository. It has to return iObservable of type resource, of type user, invoke, string email and password. To return a repository without this, and login, email and password. With the same manner, let's create the others and group those functions under a class. Now let's implement the repository. We need actually as dependencies the API service, database, and the crypto service. Let's start with this clear cached user. We have to use the context and to get the first user. It's going to be of type user entity by using await and context user entities, first or default async. We are assuming that only one user is going to use this application per session. If this cached user or user to be deleted is null, you have to do an early return, nothing to be done. I'm not going to delete anything. Now we can delete the user using the context and user entities and remove user to be deleted. And we have to save async. Afterward, we have to load the query to refresh basically the query. Either you have to do it here under clear cached user or to do it under the logout session. By refreshing the query, we're going to make sure that we don't have any active user and load async. Now to get the authenticated user, and it should give us the same stream of data of the login function. Let's construct this observable. It's going to be of type resource, of type user. Parameter is observer. Let's create here the cancellation token source, and let's initialize the composite disposable for the cleanup. We have to do cleanup and add the disposable. We have to create an instance of type disposable, and we have to cancel cancellation token. Then we have to return cleanup. Now we have to make the API call. Here in the second argument, we have to pass the cancellation token and token. First thing that we have to do here is to emit a resource of type loading, indicating that we are loading basically the request. Next, we have to check if we have a cached user in order to simulate that we are under a valid session. And it is a good practice actually to pass as an argument the cancellation token. Now we have to check if the user is null. If the user is null, we're going to send to the stream of data an API of type error of type API exception. Cached user is not found. Next, we have to complete the stream or to finish the stream and make here an early return. Let's initialize the transaction because we have to deal with multiple items or multiple tables under our database. And let's wrap everything within a try catch block. First of all, we have to get and retrieve the GWT token. Let's store it under token by calling crypto service, retrieve and protect GWT token by providing the key, which is token file name. Next, we have to pass to the headers of the request the bearer token. Next, we have to make the API call. Let's store this user DTO and we have to provide the needed arguments. Now we have the data from Laravel. We have to cache the data. Basically, we have first of all to cache the product and the related images, then the wishlist item. Let's initialize the product detail. Now we have to check if this product detail is not null from the API call. Let's convert this product detail to product entity. Next, we have to create or update the product entity. Create or update the first argument, which is basically the product entities, and second argument, product entity, and the callback function to find existing entity. To this callback function, we don't care actually about the parameters. We have to use the context to look for the first element that matches basically this product entity from the API call to be replaced. First or default async. Let's call this parameter P for product and ID equal product and ID. We have to update the related images under the same scope of product. Let's store the image entity from the conversion of the DTO to entity. And we have to pass as an argument the product ID. Now in the same manner that we have done here, we have to create or update the entity. And here we have to look for the same image that has the same unique ID from the backend. After the for loop, first of all, we have to save the changes by adding the product as well as its related images. Next, we have to remove to refresh basically the existing wishlist items. After that, we have to save the changes asynchronously. Next, we have to save the new items or the new wishlist items. Let's convert from DTO to entity. Now we can assign to the entity user entity its related wishlist from the conversion of the DTO to entity. Now we can save the changes and commit the transaction. Afterward, we have to subscribe to the stream of data that we have implemented in the database, stream user resource. Equal context, stream user resource, and subscribe. And you have to pass here as an argument the observer. Now for the cleanup, we need to add the subscription to the cleanup to cancel any remaining tasks. Now it's time to handle the exceptions. Let's say, for example, we have the exception file not found exception, in which case we're going to have this kind of exception when we are going to deal with retrieving and protecting the GWT token. In this case, we're going to have an exception file not found exception. We have to roll back by doing transaction and rollback async, passing here the cancellation token. Next, we have to send to the observer a value which is of type error, API exception, invalid token. Afterward, we have to complete the stream and to dispose the cleanup. Another exception that can occur for the database. As usual, going to roll back the transaction and send an API exception, and of course, finish the stream and proceed with the cleanup. And we can pass here to the exception, an inner exception, if you will, for the database. It's going to be useful in our test. And if it is not file not found or any other exception for that matter, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. And we have just to send the error itself. And that's pretty much it for the implementation of get authenticated user. And let's handle this particular function. It's going to be with the same manner that we have done earlier. Let's load the needed query if the user is not null, and we have to return entity to user entity. We have to add here the async keyword. Logging function is going to be pretty much similar to get authenticated user. Let's initialize here the transaction to be used. First of all, we have to send a loading state, and we can make the API call. Let's store it under login response DTO. Post. For the URL is login, and for the form data, you have to pass the email and password since they have the same key as the related parameter. Now we have the token actually from the response. Let's store the token and user DTO under dedicated variables. Now we have to check if the user DTO is null and the token is null. Now we have to convert from user DTO to entity. Next, we have to add this user entity to the list user entities. Next, we have to save the data. Now, what we have to do is to save the data as well as we have done earlier, save the products, save the related images, and the wish list. Yeah, just to copy the same thing that we have done here. Afterward, we have to save the changes, then refreshing the data of the wish list. Let's get the wish list from DTO to entity. We have done this earlier. Next, we have to save the changes and to commit the transaction. Afterward, we have to save and protect the GWT token by using crypto service, the token file name. Afterward, we have to subscribe to the stream of data, stream user resource, and we have to add the subscription to the cleanup. One thing I guess that we have to do just for safety purposes, this value can be actually null, I don't know, depending on the conversion from the JSON to the DTO. For this purpose, just to be sure 100%, I'm going to add this as nullable. If the user DTO or the token is null, we're going to return an API error, and you have to finish the stream and make here an error return. We're going to handle the exceptions. The only difference here, we don't care actually about the token. For the logout function, we have to check first of all if we have a cached user. Let's wrap everything with try catch. If it's null, we're gonna throw an exception, cached user not found. We have to retrieve and unprotect the token. Let's prepare the headers by assigning the beer token, as we have done earlier. Now we can make the API call. After logging out the user from Laravel, we have to clear the cache. Now, after refreshing the query, we can clear the local observer, user entities. It is an object for tracking. By calling clear, it's gonna untrack any untracked entity. Afterward, we have to return the response. If we have a file not found exception, throw new API exception. Let's say, for example, invalid token. Other exception than the file not found exception, we're gonna throw basically that exception. It's gonna be very simple, and since it's gonna contain only one line of code, and we have to do await an API service, the method in question is put. It's gonna give us a string, the API endpoint, and the form data. And that's pretty much it for the implementation of the repository. Now we have to define the DI module. It has to implement IDI module. We have forgot basically under DI module of the products domain module to register the view model for products view model. Let's register this view model. First of all, we have to show how to inject the interface by providing the implementation. Next, we have to provide the use cases. Register this dependency. Now we can register the use cases. And hopefully we're not gonna forget about this to do. Before wrapping up the video, we have to do some tests for the implementation. Following the same structure of our feature, it has to inherit from integration test. Now we have to add the dependency authentication feature in features test. Add project reference and select authentication feature. Now we have to provide the use cases to test. As usual, we have to provide the repository, the use cases. Now we can implement the first test. Let's test the login use case should authenticate user and get correct user data. Let's arrange the mock user from mock data and let's change its email. This is just optional. Now we have to store the results of the subscription from the observer somewhere. It has to be a list of resource of type user. Now we can actually equal use cases and login by passing the correct email and correct password. And we have to do subscribe. Every time we're gonna have a snapshot, we're gonna save it directly by doing results and add the observed state. Can we do this? All right, that's pretty much it. Next, we have to wait for 2 seconds for the async emissions to complete. 2 seconds will do. For the first assertion, we have to make sure that the results have count greater than 1, which means that we have some data to deal with. Next, let's store the load-in state. It's gonna be the first snapshot of type load-in. and the success state. It should be basically the last snapshot under the stream. Now we have to make sure that we are under loading state, and the data under loading state should be null initially. That's exactly what we have done in the implementation. Next, we have to make sure we are under success state and the data is not null. Afterward, we have to make sure that we have the correct data, the non-null value. We have to force actually the non-null value, and we have to make sure that this user is not null. It's equivalent to the correct user data. Now we have to check if we have a token. Let's store this under token. Let's try to get the token using crypto service and retrieve and unprotect this token. The file name, it's basically token file name. For this assertion, we need to make sure that the token is not null, and it should be exactly this particular token from the mock data. And you have to dispose the subscription. It's enough, but we want to make sure again that we have some data from the database. After the success state, we have to get the cached user. We need to make sure that this entity, let's name it cached user. We need to make sure that this cached user entity is not null as shown here. And we have to make sure that it's equivalent to the correct user data. I'm gonna copy this, paste it here. Let's run the test. All right, I'm going to increase this particular delay to 3 seconds. I don't think that we have the same results as the cached data. We haven't converted the cached user entity to user model, all right? And let's run a test. Now it has to pass. And the test passed, which is good. For the other test case related to the login user, we need to make sure that login should fail after wrong credentials. I'm gonna copy the same thing here. We don't need actually the mock user. Let's wait for 4 seconds and let's make exact assertions. For the loading state, the number of emissions is greater than 1. Instead of success, it should be error. And under the error state, we have to make sure that we are under error state and the data under error state is null. And we have to make sure that the exception under error state is of type API exception. And we have to dispose the subscription. Before running the test, we need to pass here the wrong credentials. Let's arrange here the wrong credentials and let's pass the wrong credentials in invoke. And that's pretty much it for this test. Let's run the test. Now we have to test get authenticated user should get the current authenticated user. As usual, we have to seed some data to make sure we have a valid session. Next, we have to save the token. Now let's arrange the results where to store the observed data and the correct user data. As usual, we have to act. Let's wait for 4 seconds. Let's do the same assertion. Let's make sure that we have at least loading state and success state. We have to make sure we are under loading state and the data under loading state is null. We are under success state and the data under success state is equivalent or are equivalent to the correct user data. And again, it doesn't matter actually if you want to test the cached data, because under get authenticated user, we suppose that we have some cached data already. Next, we have to dispose the subscriber or the subscription. I think that's pretty much it. Let's run the test. All right, so far so good. Let's check for the get authenticated user. Should get no user after wrong token, which is very important. Basically, we won't allow the user to access any private parts in the application when providing wrong token. As usual, we're going to seed the database, arrange the results, and act and wait for 4 seconds. To simulate basically the scenario, we shouldn't provide here any token for that matter. We don't care actually about any comparison here. Instead of success, it should be error. For the first assertion, under the error state, we need to make sure we are under error state. Next, we need to make sure that the exception under error is not null. The exception should be of type API exception. And to eliminate any doubt, we have to check that the message under the error is invalid token. And that's pretty much it for this test. Let's run the test. All right, very good. Now for the logout function, we need to make sure that the logout function should log out the current authenticated user. Let's feed some data to the database. I'm going to copy this. Now we have to act. Next, we have to make sure that this response is true. And we have to check that we have completely wiped out the data from the database. Let's look for this user entity. Here we have to do user ID, user and ID equal user ID. Now you have to check that this cached user entity is null instead of not be null. You are not following along Visual Studio. We need to make sure that we don't have any errors here. By doing exception, gonna fail basically the test by doing assert and fail with this kind of message. I think that you got the idea. Now let's run the test. Very good. Now for the last test case before wrapping up the video, we need to make sure that the logout use case should not log out the current authenticated user after round token. To simulate this scenario actually, I'm gonna copy this and we don't have to assign any token here. We're going to act. We don't care actually about the response here. Delete this. And we're going to fail actually the test. After acting, we need to fail the test. Now we are expecting an exception. Therefore, you have to do exception should be of type API exception. That's pretty much it. Let's run the test. And the test passed. To make sure there is no interference, as always, we have to run all tests at once. Run. That's very good. There is no interference. It's going to be useful if you want to implement a pipeline for CI/CD. And that's going to wrap up our today's video. For the next tutorial, we will implement the presentation layer. It's going to be hectic. If we survive that particular section, we're going to implement the integration test for the view model. I hope you have learned something new. See you in the next one, and happy coding.